Hey there, everybody. This is Through a Therapist's Eyes. We are getting used to being on YouTube Live. If you haven't caught us before, this is the live portion before the main show that we start on Spotify and whatnot. That is Mr. John Pope hanging out with us over there.
Good to be here.
Mrs. Victoria Pendergrass over there.
Hello.
And this is, I got to get the date right? March the 23rd.
Yes.
I nailed
3/23/23.
That's been fun to write all day long. It's been fun. I love writing dates on the progress notes that we do all day. Anyway, we are going to be talking about an interesting angle on addiction. I wanted to sort of slant our focus because we've talked about addiction on the show, but how estrangements in various relationships occur, what they are, and in recovery, how people handle them with addictions, because it affects a lot of people, whether you have addiction yourself or you know somebody that has issues with drug, alcohol addictions. Of course, we also know there's 4 process addictions. Victoria, how are you? Well, we'll get to the live show.
Okay.
We'll say belay that question.
Okay.
We'll get to that when we're live recording, but we've enjoyed doing this YouTube stuff. We've switched over from Facebook Live. If you're happen to finding us here now, tell your friends, subscribe. We're really kind of angling to kind of bump up on YouTube a good bit. We're doing a switch over this year, so thank you for checking us out and hanging with us. So I guess, Neil, we're not going to have too much of a delay, or what?
Nope, ready to go when you are.
Okay, we are. Well, now I need to be ready. He's making me do a different process. I don't like change, John.
Yeah. You sound like a Presbyterian.
Oh dear God.
Yeah, we don't do change.
We don't do
Oh,
change.
you're a Presby?
I'm a Presby, yeah.
My mom and dad are Presbys now. They made the switch to a Presby after.
They've gone to the dark side.
After
Is it
I went
really
to
a big
college.
switch, though? I mean,
From
what?
From Methodist.
No.
You know what I would like to do with you
Or United
sometime?
Methodist. I don't know if there's
Yeah,
quite a
well-
difference.
I would seriously like to sit down with you. For those of you who don't know on YouTube, John is a Presbyterian pastor, as
Right.
well as a therapist, as well as an awesome person, as well as a husband. You are so many things, as well as a retired
from Montreat.
Montreat College professor. Anyway, a lot of things, right? Now, I want to sit down with you someday and list out the top 10 Christian religions and what the real differences are.
Okay.
Why they get pissed off with each other.
Oh,
I
love
kind of
to.
want to know that.
If I have to do that, I have to burn you at the stake.
Well, I can
Draw-
handle a little bit of flame,
Right.
but you know.
That might be like a bonus special episode or something.
No,
like
I would
that.
love to
See,
do that.
Would
And-
that be an
yeah,
interesting
and just have
episode?
if we ever do like a Patreon or something like that, like stuff like that, I think would be.
That's
But-
a
to have,
really
like,
excellent idea. Neil.
extra-
That would affect how you view your mental health too. It's
See,
different
and then you could
theological
tie it into
aspects.
mental health, and because I mean, there's some people that are like you're right. Like if
Oh, it's maddening.
if they're Methodist and you call them Baptist, they get all like,
Oh, it's maddening.
You know, you're like,
People are
okay.
so particular about that sort of thing. It's just, honestly, it's kind of nuts to me, though, man.
Yeah. I think that'd be a cool because then you could sit down and record it, publish it, or whatever.
that is
the
a great
terminology.
sort of idea for a Patreon thing and extra bonus content. So with off
My
color
experience
topics like
with
that.
religion has been very positive.
That's off color, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah.
off color.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least in the millennial
The-
time frame, most of millennials have not had a good experience with religion.
We'll call it a non-PC through a therapist's eyes
Yeah.
on Patreon only.
Well,
oh, that's you writing this stuff down, Neil?
I think part of it is well, I won't.
Yeah.
We'll do a separate one,
We'll definitely do a separate one.
and it can be toxic.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Mr. Neil. Yes. Hello, this is March the 23rd, and you have found Through a Therapist's Eyes. That is Mr. I'm going to say Victoria Pope over there.
No,
No,
His Holiness
Oh, my goodness. The Pope.
Pope John.
Be careful, man. You're talking about being burned at stake a little bit before the mics
That's
came
right.
on. You better be careful, brother. No, that is Miss Victoria Pendergrass.
Hello.
And Mr. John, the Pope, is hanging out with us. So we are going to be talking today about a different angle on recovery from addiction, the estrangements that kind of occur and how they kind of occur and how to manage them, because it's an angle that isn't really talked about in recovery circles a lot, honestly.
Right.
And I had a really interesting conversation even just today that was kind of extensive about that. And he gave me permission to kind of pepper that in. So literally, like what you get on Through a Therapist's Eyes is what we say through our eyes, what we deal with in our therapy offices. You know, some of this topic is just that. So
It's not as emphasized as much as it used to be. Is that part of that is because of treatment issues?
I
or-
don't think it's ever really
Yeah.
been emphasized, John. I'll be curious to hear more about that
Okay.
with what your thoughts are. That's a curious. I'm curious there.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So now, so where's my intro stuff? Yeah. We have the book out, Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. The Facebook Live has turned over to YouTube Live, so we definitely want to tell your friends, subscribe, share it, whatnot. I don't know. Can you share YouTube? You can. I did not know that you could share YouTube videos. How cool is that? Well, yeah, I did, I guess. I don't do it very often, but I do digress. This is the delivery of therapy services.
It is not the delivery of therapy services.
But it is where you get insights from therapists and personal time in your car and personal time at home. Look, this is the human emotional experience. We seriously enjoy and endeavor to figure this out together with you. So, do you have a clear understanding of what addiction is? I have a whole lot of content that we've done on the show about that, and I still am amazed at how confused people get about that. What does it mean to you, recovery? In the addictions field, that's actually controversial a little bit. I don't know if I could say controversial, but people that in the addictions field, you need to understand, even have confusion or difference about we're in recovery or we're recovered. It's an interesting dynamic. So there's some things there. And then what do we mean by addiction being a family disease? Because that has a lot to do with the estrangements that we get into. So John, I'm curious, circling back there to that, right?
Right.
I would maintain, and it seems like you have a different experience,
Yeah.
talking about recovery issues.
But see, I'm so old.
Yeah, there's an old
No.
joke.
Yeah.
Is that going to
no,
be
I'm
your
serious.
focus point today?
No, when I went to seminary, and we had this all the time, and that's where we had families involved with recovery of clients, and in those days we called them patients. And,
Well, no, I get that. Around the 80s, really more like the 70s, Claudia Black and others were transformational in changing the previous belief that addiction really is a disease of an individual, and there wasn't much
Right.
focus on anything else. But she brought around all of the dynamics that I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight.
Murray
with
Bowen.
Family dynamics. I don't know that name.
Murray Bowen is Bowen Family's systems, which was the genograms all the time. And we talked about, he dealt and worked with a lot of the...
That was Virginia Satir did a lot of that.
No, she got it from him.
Oh, really? She
Yeah.
took it.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah.
funny?
And we worshipped at the altar of Virginia Satir,
Right.
but first we worshipped at Murray Bowen's.
Interesting.
Yeah,
But
and I don't mean that literally.
Yeah,
okay,
of course.
So-
But it's interesting because what I'm saying is it's not really ever been a focus on the angle of, specifically and particularly in recovery, how to recover the estranged reality
now
of your
that
relationships.
Yeah, now you got that.
This is the angle that I'm
Okay,
taking. Okay, so
okay.
we're on the same page as we usually are. The estrangement recovery in damaged and broken and, the fault lines that get created in an addict's life. How about that for a statement?
That's excellent.
Are profound and haven't really been discussed. I don't feel like. It's like you get in recovery and you manage yourself and, family relationships kind of come around, but there's not a lot of guidance for people in recovery to recover the relationships that have been fractured throughout their life. Right?
Right.
So that's the way I want to bend us a little bit
Okay.
today. Yeah.
So if you were looking at it from a family systems point of view a little bit, and that would be that your family's in disequilibrium. In other words, it's in chaos, and the idea is that the family would like to establish equilibrium again.
Yes.
But instead of going back to the alcoholism or the alcohol misuse or substance use, you would establish a new equilibrium,
And
that would reinforce positive.
And our family members or friends, man, or coworkers, people in that addict's life, are they in a place to really facilitate themselves with that? Which is part of like this big fracture that happens, this chasm that gets so wide. It's like, look, I have been here for a long time, supporting you, loving you, caring for you. Unfortunately, it might have been codependent ways, and I just got so burnt out that I can't do this anymore. And now you're coming back and you're saying you're great and in recovery and everything's wonderful. Well, I'm not.
Exactly.
Right. And this is why I have a metaphor for addiction, and this will be a good transition to think about, like, so in recovery, I hearken it to being a black hole, because it gobbles all the physical and emotional resources of that individual and all those around the person. So this is a cool metaphor.
I like that metaphor.
Yeah.
But and I think that's one thing that you would note is that many relationships, marriages, partnerships, long-term living arrangements just kind of crumble.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Get destroyed.
And the little kiddos, they get wiped out.
They really have a massive amount of emotional insecurity, essentially, that plays out throughout their life. As a matter of fact, early on in my travels, I heard this reality, Victoria, about addiction that I'm curious how will strike you, is that when you take one individual's alcohol or drug addiction, you will need 3 generations of sobriety to eradicate the emotional.
That's Bowen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's Bowen.
Okay, well,
So
I
we
must have
went
liked him.
Yeah.
I thought that was crazy.
From
John.
generation to ungenerate. Yeah.
I thought that was bizarre. I totally poo-pooed that, early in my career. I'm like, no, that's crazy.
Well,
that doesn't make any sense.
I don't think it's that crazy, because when you think of all other sorts of trauma, like generational, it takes like
A long time.
like if when you parenting, like all those types of things, when you're breaking a cycle, it's not going to happen over one generation. So I mean, it makes sense to me that it would take several generations to
people have
break that break that cycle.
You were a lot brighter than I was early in my career about your stage of your career.
Yeah.
too,
Well,
by
no,
the way.
that's the thing is that people have to be prepared to be able to say, okay, I'm not just doing it for me right now,
Right.
But we're going to do it for generational. And I think we talked about that in other areas.
But I don't think that gets enough press either in the recovery treatment world. And that is a good, relapse recovery tool. That is a good thing to focus on, because you really are affecting the generations, plural, after you. Which means if I'm the addict, my kid, the first generation, my grandkids are the second, and then finally the grandkids being their parental relationship to their kids is the third generation. Like that's a lot. So Victoria, anyway, I'm curious. That was a little bit of a spin to the segment I want to do. I don't think we can have conversations about addiction unless we have some interlude on what addiction is. It is so twisted nowadays, I feel like. And I'm curious, John, because I know you carry more experience. You've been dealing with addiction for how long in your career? Like
40-some years.
Yeah, when did you get trained and whatnot?
I would say 77, 78. And then
specifically in substance abuse field.
Alcohol.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then in 1988 and 89, I went through the Navy program for training.
Yeah. I'll tell you why I'm so into that. And any therapist listening out here, I'm going to be opinionated right now, and I apologize a little bit for that, but not really, because I'm going to say it. Like, I find a great problem in the massive divide that has been in our industry between substance abuse professionals and mental health professionals. I used to feel like such an oddball being in the middle of that crew that did both mental health and substance abuse. I really, really did.
Well,
in the early 90s, I was like...
I think it's still there.
It's absolutely still there, John, and that's what I'm railing on.
Well, and that's one thing is, like, Casey was my supervisor who's been on the podcast, and she told me that, like, really, in almost every client you work with, there's probably some sort of addiction.
It's an issue
in there, and whether it's them personally or it's a family member, like there is some sort of you're going to be dealing with addiction.
And here's the deal: to jump in, the reality of it is, guys and gals out there, is that when you have an utter refusal to gain awareness and understanding and knowledge about the substance abuse field, you will have a massive blind spot. And I submit. Again, sorry, I know it's a little bit of an opinion, and I don't mean to step on anybody's toes, but it's such an important issue because of what Victoria was just saying. The reality of it is you will have in most, I don't know, percentage-wise, I'm going to say all clients are going to have parents, they're going to have family members, they're going to have themselves, and they're not going to tell you that it's there. So it really is incumbent upon the mental health field to gain awareness and education and training on substance abuse. There, I've said it. I think that's super important.
I think it's key how you do the assessments too, because you can you can mine a lot of information where there would be initially a denial. And then get other.
I learned that the hard way because I was meeting with someone basically since I started here in August, roughly.
Okay.
And it was only like recently that I found out that they admitted to having an issue with alcohol. It was like alcohol or cigarettes or something like that, like some type of addiction. And I was like, oh crap, like I've been meeting with you for like 6 months and you're like, I'm just so yeah. And I mean, I learned my lesson there, like in my assessment, that was, when I first started here and I was still.
You were green. You weren't green.
Yeah.
So Victoria, we don't get this in school. If you're not purposeful about getting the substance abuse training and understanding and wrapping yourself around, I'm going to ask you a question, 1 out of 10. 10A, I feel pretty solid in my understanding of addiction and drug treatments. 1 being, I've never exposed. I don't do anything with this. This is not my deal. Just curious where you'd put yourself.
I'd probably say like a 5 or a 6.
Oh, pretty high.
Yeah, well.
Pretty high.
Yeah, at least
because you paid attention.
5. Yeah,
and I know you had an awesome supervisor.
Yeah, shout out to Casey. But I think it's also just in grad school you have an addictions course.
I did not know that.
Yes, you do.
It's just a semester.
We do in counseling. It's required by KCRAP.
Yeah, it's required
our accrediting agency.
Yeah. So no, you're right. No, so
wow.
Just to be clear, the reason why Chris is shocked by that is because he's a licensed social worker. So your course of graduate school might be different than myself and John, who are licensed clinical mental health counselors. But then again, it's just a semester. And it's just all the board, you're not deep dive, and really, you're not getting into treatment of people who you just learn about the addictions, you learn about the theories, and honestly, if you ask me right now to recall one of those, other than the person you've already mentioned,
I really want to spin back to you, Victoria, on this, because you're fresh from grad school and whatnot, and I'm learning. I really want to learn about this because the segment we're on here is what is addiction, and that gets hot. Mm-hmm. But John, I'm curious from your perspective, you agreed with me that there's this great divide between the professions.
Exactly.
And I know and have recognized for a while that it's gotten better. It has gotten better. I literally heard Claudia Black talking about that, which is, my big first foray into understanding family dynamics with her content back in the 90s. I actually saw her talk live. That was really cool. And she made the point recently on a show that I heard her on saying, wow, we never knew we needed to have some understanding of mental health. And now we talk about mental health issues. And I'm sitting there in my car, I'm dying driving home. And I'm like, of course, yes, of course. I was so happy to hear that. How much has it gotten better in your view? Because I just took a jump up today in saying the fact that there's a semester course in grad school is fan-freaking-tastic.
Well,
I didn't know that.
I'm supervising somebody currently, and he's working for where it's basically a methadone clinic, and he's working with people that are addiction specialists. They have the certification. There's different levels, but he is viewed with suspicion because he has a master's in clinical mental health counseling. And he's already got a certification because he worked in an area. So you get that one area where there's no intersection, and then you get some others. I have a colleague who I esteem very much. She's at Carolina Behavioral, and she is working very closely with clinical mental health counseling and addiction issues
To bring them together.
Bring them together. It's Kathy Allen. She might be a good guest to
It's
ask to
interesting.
come on.
I'm
on
really
board.
glad to hear that. I'm still going to stand by what I was saying opinionatedly a little bit in the field, that if you refuse to pay attention to substance abuse, which I think there's a lot of people out there that definitely still do that, you're creating a blind spot in your clinical delivery. of
Exactly.
practice.
Now, I do know from
Do
my
not back down from that.
Thank you.
from my experience in my grad school program, I went to Lenore Ryan in Hickory, and we have several McLeod, I think is the name of it, which is a methadone clinic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so they were always looking for job or for hiring people because it's just such like a back then that it was really easy for a lot of the grad students. Like I know several of the grad students that I was in with, it was really easy for them to get like sucked into that. And then
Well, and you don't actually do counseling. They discourage any of that counseling.
Right,
And
yeah.
you get 15 minutes with your client.
right.
What's that
What
going to do?
you can't do anything.
Okay, well, let me get us back on track
Anyways,
with
yeah, sorry.
Victoria. In grad school,
Yeah.
what are the theories? What are the beliefs? How do we see addiction in the academic realm of our field? And here's the history real quick.
Okay.
I am really steeped in the more of the traditional kind of 12-step disease model, biological reality that we've still yet to date gotten clear on through science. But that nowadays the other side of the debate seems to be a lot looser of a definition about how addiction works. Hazelton studies that have come out, what happens with compulsive use and falling into addiction later on in life. I'm kind of the mind that a baby is an alcoholic. They just haven't had alcohol yet, and we really don't know that they're the case. Now, I want to also give us a warning. Let's be a little brief, guys, because we could do a long time with this, because I want to know what you think too, John. What do you think?
For me, as I mentioned earlier, it's not an in-depth semester course. Like, we went over the 12-step program. We went over, like, the basic stuff, and I'm honestly, I can't remember any of it. I mean,
Okay.
that was so long ago that, they dealt with the basics of, like what addiction is and,
Well, that's the
things
question. What is it?
I would define it as like the ability to like not control, like to be so,
Well, that's right on point from what we know.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's how
Okay, John,
I
what
don't
do
know
you
what else you want me to say.
take it, John. What do you
It's
Yeah,
like-
let me
it's
give
like
it to
understand
John.
Yeah, it's like pornography. You can know it when you see it, and
Yeah.
so an addiction is very much something that, and I'm describing it. It's something that other people see, and the person that has an addiction doesn't see in himself or herself or fully understands that.
Really cool take.
Yeah, but it's also, but there's also the concept of denial that goes in with addiction.
I guess I want to cut to the chase and move on to the point or idea of is it genetic,
Sorry.
biological, or is it more social and emotional and
It's
compulsive
moral.
use?
No,
Yeah,
no.
boy, we're going
Boy,
back on
back
old school
in the
there.
old days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was moral, but I personally think that it's a dance of a physical and emotional addiction along also with biochemical. And so there's a genetic aspect to this. And so it's a whole mixture.
Can you be an addict when you weren't an addict before?
Well, we're just waiting to be an addict, aren't we? Is that what you were bringing up?
I think it can be both, I guess.
I really
genetics and
fall
social.
on the lines of, like I said, a baby has addiction or doesn't. We just don't know until we begin to, as you say, John, see it, how it plays out in the symptom sets that we look on for that.
So Freud would talk about drives and, and all of that. We all have these drives. So can those become addiction?
No, I do not see that way.
Okay.
I categorically do not go that direction, which is quite to the point. How do we categorize addiction? We used to have, alcohol abuse, and then we had alcohol dependence, mild, moderate, and severe.
Right.
There are clear delineations on.
Now we still have that with AUD.
No, we now we go substance use disorder.
Yeah,
and
or alcohol
mild,
use
moderate,
disorder.
Mild, moderate, and severe. They have gotten rid of the delineation between abuse of the substance and dependence.
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, and I think there's a clear delineation. If you're abusing a substance, that is not addiction.
No, you're right.
Well,
but I'm an old school,
Again, I think that we're on
so then you
clearer steps with that.
Can you explain why you think that abuse of something is not the same thing as being addicted to it?
Well, the old thinking, again, we need to get off of this because we're going to go too long here. But I want to answer your question. Because it's important. There's so many questions about what are we even talking here when we're talking about estrangements of relationships and what happens in recovery when there's so much confusion about what addiction is. So the delineation here, Victoria, traditionally is that with abuse issues, with substance abuse issues, there is control over your use. I mean, there's several symptoms that we look for addiction. But you go from having some sort of problem with your use of alcohol, drugs, pot, pills, weed, everything else, in place of alcohol, and you continue to use. That's what we used to call abuse, but that is not addiction. There are other symptoms, but the big jump is exactly what you landed on. Controlled use. And that leads to mild addiction, moderate addiction, or severe addiction.
But do you not think that someone that is at least somewhat abusing a substance or whatever I don't know. I guess this might be the young part of me. But in my brain, it seems like if you're abusing something, then there has to at least be some sort of addiction there.
No, I would say no. And that's what I mean. That's why it's become, there can be, don't get me wrong, but that's where you get, people that are using alcohol to cope with emotions inappropriately. And it can get pretty ugly, it really can. Yeah. But they still have control over their use, and there's a big differential.
People with complicated grief, you'll see an increase of alcohol use.
Absolutely.
And misuse.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't necessarily mean addiction.
It does not.
So then are you saying like the person, male or female or whoever, comes home every night and every night they have a glass of bourbon? That would you consider that like just like abuse or an addiction? Like, and then they feel some type of way if they go a couple days and don't have one.
Well, you have the physical.
Go ahead, John.
That would take place, and so that would indicate addiction. Because let's say if your heart rate changes and your blood pressure changes and all the other aspects, and you start having physical reactions and sickness.
But then let's say one day said person comes home and drinks half a bottle of tequila, but then they don't drink anything for another 3 weeks. Then or they go a couple days and they drink several.
Well, the way I was instructed was that you would have the even if you do binging and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
that would indicate
Abuse.
abuse. It could
Not.
dependency, abuse, and even to the extent that it would progress into addiction.
So it could progress. So abuse can progress into addiction, is what you are saying. But ultimately,
See, but that's
Or-
the interesting piece.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what I mean. Okay. YouTube is still live. Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you're getting kind of a behind the scenes. I just stopped recording because I wanted to fill out. I think we need to change the whole title.
Okay.
I really do. Like, I don't want to stop this conversation.
Right.
But I'm kind of like, we are way off part.
The
off
estrangement,
point
yeah.
with the estrangement part,
Yeah.
but it's clear that our conversation is so much, like this. I knew this was going to go along with this segment because it's just so confusing and tricky with our field. And so I think I want to literally change the title and we'll do this the time after womanizing or something and make another addiction show.
So then what is today's title going to be?
I write it down here, Neil. Seriously,
addiction?
the panel battles on what is addiction.
Somebody
How about
that prescribes. Are we on?
We're on YouTube Live.
but
On
we're not
YouTube.
recording.
Okay.
So you will be there for posterity's sake. So
But it's
Oh,
not
I want.
Go ahead. You can say whatever you're saying.
Well, I think that somebody that the school of thought that talks about harm reduction.
Yeah, exactly.
And I had one of my professors taught that. His name was Robert Smith. And
I'm giving you an honorable reaction because, like, yeah, that's another huge issue on what is addiction and how do we. Sorry, YouTube. Sorry, people. What is addiction and how do we handle this? And that's a whole nother issue, in way of like controversy that stems from this idea of what is addiction. So,
And
yeah,
I think that's why it goes to being able to recognize pornography. You know it when you see it. I mean,
yeah,
addiction.
It's a great
is-
statement. It's
Yeah.
a great statement. So yeah, what do you got the title? What do we got?
it's just what is addiction?
I like the idea of the group battles with what is addiction. The panel battles with what is addiction.
Ding, ding,
I
ding.
think that's a cool
Ding,
title.
ding, ding.
Okay.
Okay, so you.
So then how do we want to continue?
You said something that I wanted to go back to.
Okay.
What did you say last?
Can abuse lead to? Wait, are we recording again?
YouTube Live only, but
Okay.
Well, this will be an interesting behind the scenes YouTube Live.
Yeah.
If you caught it in the middle.
Yeah. If you watch this far along, so can abuse lead to addiction?
Yeah. Okay. Right.
That's what I said.
So I'll pick up there when you're ready, Neil.
Okay. I can repeat myself if necessary.
Shoot, how long did we just take a break from?
Like
Because
a minute,
No, it's
2 minutes.
how long was it?
We've been recording. I think we recorded about 25.
I got 28 minutes. So all right, I just lost like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Got it.
something like that.
Okay.
So we don't even need to go off this paper then.
Probably not. I don't think we'll need to.
Okay,
I'll add
cool.
in how do you deal with denial with it. I've got some cool things that I've thoughts about that. But
Okay.
ready when you are, sir. So the way I see that, Victoria,
Yeah.
is
It's a tricky question.
no, right?
No?
Essentially, no. And
Okay.
so what we've just decided, we just took like a 5-minute break off camera, and I just pulled an executive decision in an audible. We're not going to be talking about the estrangements component because this is such an important issue, and I could just tell our energy and the confusion that's out there about our conversation. So the title
Right.
now is that you will have seen already out there in the world, the panel battles with what is addiction, right?
Well, and I would agree with you on that because I think that's the other thing that we've seen addiction play out in so many different ways. Is there a sense that there are separate? Let's say you're going by the disease model. Is there different types of disease which could be described as addiction,
Yeah.
such as substance use but not just a certain substance, but that type of disease process that might be going on in terms of how it affects people. And
it's funny, John, because I've never really felt secure in my learning or what I've seen, read, heard academics talking about the types. Never has really gotten crystallized in my mind with what we know about that. So I think there are a lot of unanswered questions.
there
So
are.
then, why can you then explain to me why you think someone can't,
Right.
why abuse can't
coming back
form
there.
into addiction? Because
I was coming back there.
Okay.
So, because, Victoria, the way that we have seen addiction for a long time, and studies have shown this pretty clearly, very good science on the notion that alcoholism, drug addiction, by the way, alcohol, weed, pot, pills, whatever, heroin. You also
uppers, downers, in betweeners.
We remember that video, John. Uppers,
George
downers,
Carlin.
all arounders.
All arounders.
Remember the all around? Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a title of what we have as data out there and content. We also have eating addictions, gambling addictions,
Right.
sex
Compulsive
addictions.
buying.
Well, gambling and debting.
Yeah.
Gambling addictions. Now we can also say debting addictions, eating addictions, sexual addictions, and I do believe in the World Health Organization's online video gaming addictions as being
Yes.
legit. Listen, everything else is not. It is not found to be addiction. Drugs,
Okay.
alcohol, weed, pot, pills, those 4 things. You don't get addicted to sports. You don't get addicted to cars. You don't get addicted to picking your nails. Compulsive behavior is not addiction. I'm going
Okay.
to make that statement. But again, back to your thought
Okay.
here, Victoria, we see very clear in science that alcohol addictions progress.
So
They
you're
start small and they get bigger,
Right.
just like a snowball on top of the hill. And with every
Right, as it rolls
rotation,
down
it,
the- yeah.
it does not go uphill.
So
so
then,
hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
No,
So
sorry, yeah, go.
somebody that has abusive behavior
Mm-hmm.
with alcohol might very well be early on in their addiction process. Okay? But we don't know that. We don't see
Right.
that very clearly because they don't mean enough signs. They haven't really demonstrated enough to demonstrate a lack of control. So people that don't have addiction genetically, I believe, and I think there's some science out there that says they won't become enough into it to meet the criterions
But what
For
if they do?
addiction.
for addiction. And there's great controversy about this.
Yeah.
And I don't
Like
understand
yeah,
why
like
it's so,
even for me, I feel like I get what you're saying. But then, but what you're saying is that someone can start out as having. I mean, you're basically saying that if someone that has addiction, we're saying alcohol, right? They have an
to make it simple, we'll just say
yeah.
alcoholism.
Alcoholism, and they're addicted. Well, early stages, it looks like alcohol abuse, is what you're
Correct.
saying. So it can
Correct.
go from abuse to addiction, but ultimately that addiction
Well,
is
it's appearance.
already there.
Go
The
ahead.
addiction is already there. It's just presenting as a abuse of the alcohol now, but later on it will present itself as addiction. Is
Right.
that what I'm hearing you saying?
I think you're on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would argue also, perhaps, and I'm not a medical doctor. Don't play one on TV.
Yep.
anything
And we
like
didn't
that.
sleep in Holiday Inn last
I
night.
did not sleep in a Holiday Inn, but is that physiologically people's reaction for someone who abuses alcohol or other drugs, as opposed there's a real substantial physiological changes that occur in the body. The body
Absolutely.
actually processes. For example, let's talk about alcoholism. The liver metabolizes alcohol. For most of us, if we do and we drink too much alcohol, we regret it. We have the horrible.
Hangover, yeah.
They do too. People that have alcoholism, but their body metabolizes so much more efficiently the
Okay.
alcohol. for
So
example.
basically, so they're able to function.
Yeah, they
more than someone like as if I were to go get blackout drunk.
Tolerance
Yeah.
begins to develop, which is one of the signs
Yeah.
that we look for in understanding what it looks like and what the
But
symptoms
there's a
are.
sense where the metabolizing of the alcohol is more efficient than the metabolizing.
So
of
it is.
food.
So it is physiological. Like
It is
so-
physiological.
and-
This is why I like to say babies have this or don't. We just don't know
Right.
until they begin to engage in the substance.
Which then makes more sense why when you say it takes 2-3 generations for addiction. isn't it-
sobriety. Well, that's just with sobriety
Okay. So okay.
For
to-
family dynamics.
the family dynamics, which we've switched our topic
Yeah,
today
okay.
from,
Yeah,
from
so-
when we were on
Okay. So I mean, but then just okay.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going to go with that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
John, I think that there's another interesting piece about that I was listening to you in saying. I almost kind of lost it. So what were you saying again? And it'll come back to me.
About the physiological changes where the
Yes,
body
that's
actually
exactly what it was.
metabolizes
I knew it would come back immediately
the
to me.
alcohol more efficiently than
Yeah. So
than-
what I heard once talked about, and I never heard this again, and it was fascinating to me. And I was young enough in my career that I couldn't really grasp it all, and I lost it. So I'm really excited to hear if you've seen anything about this, insofar as the metabolic reality difference between alcoholics and non-alcoholics, because there are metabolic differences. One time I heard a guy talking about the processing of alcohol in the human body. Non-alcoholics process this substance 100% elimination.
right.
They process it through 100% elimination. And there was somebody that talked about the science that identified addicted folks do not have 100% elimination when they ingest alcohol specifically. They have like, I don't know, 99.77875.
So there's a fraction of the alcohol that stays in their body. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's through the whole digestive process. Now, I've never heard another follow-up to that. I've never heard any more information about that. That's about the best description I can give for what I recall. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, I'm so excited right now.
But
I really am.
and it's interesting that there's a sense of the family dynamic obviously it affects people.
Yeah, it's emotions,
adversely.
though.
Yeah,
We're talking
so-
about metabolic, physiological, digestive
well,
process.
yeah, and you can see how it kind of changes the body too.
Yes.
There's a sense that, let's say you drink so much that it starts to affect the varices, or they call it esophageal varices.
It affects everything. Your
People bleed out.
light blood,
I actually worked
varicosity in the
with
veins. I mean,
worked with clients that were in hospital, and they were basically they were as close to death as you could possibly get and still be alive, and they would literally ooze fluid because of their liver and their kidney function.
I'll tell you something. There is not an organ that alcohol misses. It's really devastating in long-term, late-stage addiction is the language. Because in late-stage addiction, you every single organ down to your skin and everything is massively impacted.
Yeah.
But what? Let's get back to that. What you recall about the digestive process? Anything come to your mind?
I think it's somehow I'm having to go back about 20 years. but
I
it's
know.
polysaccharides or something like that in the liver, and so the storage is
Yes, that's it.
yeah, and it actually gets stored in I think fat deposits. I'm not sure, but it's deposited throughout the body.
Why have we not heard anything more about that, John?
I don't know. I don't want to step in it because I didn't sleep in the Holiday Inn.
And to be
I mean,
clear,
yeah, it
we
could
are
just be
not
lack of
medical
research
experts.
and-
We're not. I'm not a medical doctor. You are not either. And this is above my head. But I heard someone talking about that over the year, and a long time ago. I'm not 20, but more like 15 years
It's
ago.
polypeptides.
Yeah.
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 And polysaccharides.
I don't understand why
So-
we haven't gotten more insight, research, and strong evidence about what it is that is. Because that is very convincing in my young brain when I heard that. Like, oh, wow, there's something to this disease model
Yeah.
that we can kind of see and observe. Because I'm telling you, when you look at addiction, man, and the progression aspect of it, it is not a lot of these folks that have been abusing alcohol for a long time. You can be using alcohol to cope with your emotions, and you don't get there. There in late stage addiction is so loud, so clear. Like the symptoms are, I mean, it's
Yeah.
I
profound.
mean, I think probably the reason that it hasn't been information is first money and research. Like
Yeah.
someone actually has to say like, oh, this is something that I want to research and look into, and then they actually have to have probably bodies to research on. Would be my
Exhumed
guess.
and yeah,
Or
I-
or
Yeah.
or
there's
whatever.
got to be research ethics. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was crap.
When
forgot what
I
gonna
was
say.
I'm so old. I
my
watched
gosh.
I was in high school in California, and they showed us a picture of the results of somebody that died in a car crash.
Yeah.
And they did an autopsy. This is on film. Now I'm in
Oh,
the 10th
Lord.
grade, and they take her brain out and they cut the brain in sections, and they do where the ventricles have shrunken, and
Yeah.
you know the white matter has basically eroded away, and then they said this could happen to you.
Oh Lord, I would be traumatized.
Traumatized.
But
But-
I remember what I was going to say. I think it would be beneficial if someone ended up doing more research about this, because
Hugely.
I think, and as we've talked about this before, like it's very eye opening for a lot. Like I think this could be very eye opening for our clients to be able to tell them like, okay, this is what happens to you. Feel
Theologically.
Theologically, well,
Biologically.
there's a spiritual
physiologically,
aspect to it. Yeah.
physiologically, and like biologically, like this is what happens to your body. I think because a lot of times we've talked about how, you know, explaining diagnoses to clients can be very eye opening for clients and can be very enlightening and stuff. So I think maybe potential, and I could be wrong about this, but potentially being able to explain like, okay, this is your body is different than someone who doesn't have addiction, like down to the way that your body metabolizes and stuff.
Exactly.
Like, and I think that could be very,
De-shaming.
yeah.
And take the guilt
De-escalating.
away from it.
Yeah.
It's it lends to the ability of allowing someone to understand they're not going back to your statement, John, an immoral person. In the
Right.
50s and 60s, when we started to identify the explosion of alcoholism specifically in relationship to prohibition, allowing people to really get pretty freaking crazy on alcohol.
Yeah.
Because of the intensity levels that have happened. Look,
It's-
the moral reality is not a factor. These are not losers, dumb street people that go on. It is, and to the YouTube question that we have received, you know, does heredity determine tendencies towards addiction? And the answer in my mind is yes.
Yes, a definite yes.
Soundingly
yeah.
clear, scientifically studied, yes. But why we get this idea in our field where people are just like, oh, well, you know, if you're abusing alcohol, be careful now, you might trigger off addiction.
See,
I'm kind
and
of like,
probably a week ago, before this, I probably would have been one of those people saying that.
right. Like, look,
But-
if you start having abuse of alcohol at the age of, let's just say, 38. Now, I'm not saying if you never had alcohol
Right.
until age 38. I'm
You're saying
saying
abuse of
you've been
it.
drinking, you've been doing, you know, a little bit of weed, what have you, and party and college, and and then but you hit like 38 and you start getting pretty abusive with it.
Yeah.
Let's say you've just gone through bankruptcy or whatever major life event has happened, and you start to really get into any of these types of things: eating, sexual behavior, online video gaming. Did I say gambling? Alcohol, weed. Getting into your buddy's Adderall pills to deal with sleep, all that. You start getting pretty goofy with your relationship with drugs and alcohol at the age of 38. Prior to, life's been pretty chill. There really hadn't been any problems.
You've been able to drink here and there without...
For like 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And now you get goofy. I'm thinking that person can't really get to the addiction designation.
Right. I would agree.
That's what
Based
I'm...
off what you've told, what we've talked about so far.
That's what I'm seeing.
John, you look puzzled.
No, I followed you. I wasn't at first, but I think that's the let's say there's some severe marital problems and you're 38 and you're not sure if your spouse is faithful, separation, divorce,
whatever,
or you lose your job.
Lots of things.
Lots of things, and so that's how you're treating yourself.
Yeah,
but.
And what I was saying earlier about the physiological stuff and informing the clients, it's not that we're creating an excuse like, oh, this is my excuse for why I'm addicted to alcohol. But we're just saying, or at least I'm just saying that I think it just helps to be aware. And once you're aware, then you can make lifestyle choices or decisions to move in the right direction.
Here's an excellent contributor to our discussion from YouTube. Thank you, Neil. Can you say in real time and perfectly fit into this conversation, can you say addiction hides hurt?
Hides hurt?
Okay. And I'm going to say that addiction does not hide hurt, really. Because when you're progressing through a genetic, biological reality of your relationship with alcohol, drugs, weed, pot, pills, right? Of course, it's going to hide hurt, and there's going to be all kinds of hurt, and the emotional turmoil that gets churned through this journey through active addiction. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of hurt, and you're going to drink more. It like begins to build and spice. But with the concept of like hiding the hurt that you feel or managing the emotions that we have, well, that's the abusive component.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting rub and divide, that we have with this differential. It's fascinating stuff. Let me just tune into where our heads are at this point. Like, is your head spinning, Victoria, or
Only mildly.
mildly?
Mildly. Well, and I think for me, and we've talked about this before, you've encouraged me to, go seek out like addictions conferences and things like that to get a better understanding of, ways that you can help treat people who come to you with addiction, or even I think maybe even with abuse of something. But I think my head's a little spinning. Just because it's a lot of information and it's a lot of like thin lines sometimes between like what is what and or what could be like.
I feel like when you do scientific research, I remember this from something very early on when I was in college. The guy like drew a solid line on the board, and he said, when you study something, it looks like, oh, this is very clear, but then you get little holes in what you see, and you get additional questions, and then it's a pretty solid line with a couple of blanks, and then you hone in a little bit more and you research even a little bit more. It's kind of like, okay, well, suddenly that line looks like more blank spots, and we might get a little information to fill in those blank spots, but we zoom in a little bit more, and before you continue...
That's a reverse gestalt.
I'm not even going to try to let the audience know what that means right now, but but that's where we've gotten to some of this confusion, I feel like, in that through the substance abuse field with a simple question like, what is addiction? We get more and more data that seems to poke holes in what we used to think we know, and wise, fresh thinkers, which I love, new researchers, which I think is fantastic, blow up what hasn't really been blown up yet, though. And again, as simply as I can put it, babies are addicts. They just haven't had alcohol yet, so we don't know, and their system hasn't gone off on it yet. I believe that we're going to get to that point.
But you could say too, because sometimes there's parents. Let's say the birth mother with a child that's in utero, and the mother's abusing alcohol. There's some real results that affect that child forever, and that's fetal alcohol syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also with other drugs as well, cocaine, crack cocaine, heroin, that also affects the fetus. And so there is not just an inheritance, there is an epigenetic aspect which causes the manifestation or gene expression. I'm sorry. I'm going into the weeds, but it's very complicated.
And so, Chris, what you're saying is that with the whole baby thing, babies either are born addicted or they're not. So you're saying that, okay, so a baby that's born addicted, if they don't have a drop of alcohol until they're 45,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. That addiction will kick in once they have that alcohol.
Right.
Or once they pop that pill, or once
they start getting into a mind and mood altering substance,
the thing,
it will
or
begin
whatever
to
it is.
do its thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why, honestly, if you have a genetic predisposition, anyone in your family, it's a standard question in any survey. Is there any grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, sisters, parents for sure? Because we know statistically, way solid, that your chances of having addiction yourself are way higher, as with most mental health conditions.
Well, I mean, there's tons of people out there who will say, like, okay, I don't drink any kind of alcohol. I don't do any kind of this or that because addiction runs in my family.
Exactly.
And I don't want to risk
Why take the chance?
myself
Brilliant.
getting...
Listen, addiction is in my family, and I have told both of my kids very, very clearly, it makes me downright scary nervous for them.
Yeah.
About the reality that this can be an issue, because I know so much about what that life is like.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we're just talking about blanket addiction. So say your dad or your mom or a parent, we'll just say a parent was addicted to alcohol. And so you also have that addiction gene or whatever you want to call it in you. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will be addicted to alcohol. You might end up being addicted to porn. Are we saying that?
That's more the...
Like,
all right.
Is it the
Go ahead, John.
is it the same addiction that travels, or is it just addiction in general? But the thing,
I think that's the genetic aspect of it. So
What?
there's the propensity for addiction. It doesn't... But I think in terms of drugs or alcohol, in terms of mind altering.
Well, not so fast, because
you're thinking
it's
porn?
just a question.
there's an interesting thing here. To answer my view on this thought, Victoria,
Okay.
is that what you're talking about is a drug of choice. There is a drug of choice that people
Right.
tend to get mainlined on, pun intended.
The uppers tend to like the things that are stimulants, and the
Okay.
folks that take depressants, for example, alcohol, will be more likely to go that way.
Well, but when you
For a
block
drug addiction.
that, people will do what's called cross addiction and jump to something else.
Right.
Right?
But it will tend to be the same category type of...
An
It
upper.
does,
Okay.
to get in the weeds, it does
Yeah.
a little bit, yes.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
But let's say you took out all of the stimulants.
You'd go the
addictions.
other way.
You'd find another way. And you ready to blow your mind?
Okay.
I'm sure you've thought about this.
Yes.
What trips me the hell out is if this is so, the way that we're talking about the genetic reality and the disease model and long-term knowledge of that, the earlier you start on your mind and mood altering substance, the worse prognosis. We see that clearly, right?
The brain development of an
yeah.
adolescent.
You know where I'm going?
Yeah, I know exactly where you're going.
Yep.
And I would say that, and you would have that as your mind is being bathed in those chemicals.
Yep.
You are in a sense being the drug is grooming you to
It's triggering
lifelong.
early.
Yeah.
So if you're that
Wait a
person,
minute.
okay.
Wait a minute. It's triggering earlier. So usually, people never really had alcohol and whatever. I mean, sometimes it was 7, 8. It was early. Usually, my drug histories start 12, 13, whatever. So 2 things. 1, we are potty training kids with exposure to video stuff. Now, that's not addictive, not social media. That's another show, which we've done many shows on this, by the way, to get more complete deep dives. Mm-hmm. It triggers, though, particularly with pornography, to your point, John, very early on in a kid's life. I have had exposure to pornography and video exposure with gaming and whatnot with a competitive nature to it, which is online video gaming, which is different.
Right.
Very early on in people's lives, 5, 6, 4 years old.
So when I was in elementary school, I mean, yeah, more than half the school played Fortnite or played some sort of video game
that can
on
be
the
in
regular basis, like every night.
We just had rubber bands.
I know,
Stuff like
right?
that,
Marbles and
marbles.
I played with Army men and whatever. But you see what I'm saying? That scares me to death.
Yeah.
That if this is the case, and it trips me out that you're talking specifically Fortnite for elementary school kids, Victoria, because real quick, there is a difference between playing a video game campaign, doing social media, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all the stuff. There is a difference between that and online video gamings like Fortnite. I play StarCraft. StarCraft is like Fortnite, where I get onto this computer game and I'm playing not a computer. There's a fundamental difference in the gaming world of playing another person. I can tell you that I have not gotten tired of playing StarCraft for dang near 13 years now.
Because you're playing, it's a person and you're not playing a computer every time.
And it wires me, guys.
Yeah.
I get an endorphin rush. I get charged. I can be wicked laid out tired, and I play this game, and it's 2:30 in the morning before I know what happened. That's different than these other things.
So would you say that that's abuse of the game?
Go ahead, John.
No, there was a Star Trek Next Generation that had the same premise
on this issue,
on that issue, and they had this little eye device, and interesting, it looks a little bit like Google Glasses or something, but it was the Next Generation, and there was the sense that it altered the way the brain worked. It rewired the brain.
So then, are you?
So hold on, Victoria. Let me go. I know that's why I called the audible on this show.
Share,
because we want to go and go and go, don't we? I want to make sure that we answer this before we get off of the air with this issue, because we will talk about it again.
Yeah.
You hear the energy, you hear the information.
Lots
There's a
to talk
lot to
about.
kind of drab through here. So I know we're doing this at the end, but you just ask, is that abuse, Victoria? That's where people get into, like, is this abuse or is this addiction? Is this abuse or is this addiction? John, you check me here, okay?
Right.
The signs and symptoms of alcohol and drug addictions and other process addictions, gambling, sex, eating, and online video gaming, the symptoms that we are looking for are, major one is the loss of control. And I like to say that absolutely like, is what you're doing predictable? That's the easiest way to understand that. Tolerance.
Exactly.
Okay? You develop a higher than typical tolerance for people. You have lied about your use.
Okay.
And so there's a high level of dishonesty, or
So behavioral changes.
there's behavioral changes. You have some sort of legal issue in your life that has developed.
DUI, DWI,
Right.
lose a job.
So the idea here is, and what are some of the other ones? I'm going to let your brain think. The idea here is you have like 7, 8, 9, 10 of these things that we're looking for. If you have 1 or 2, okay, we're aware of it, but we don't meet criterion yet. You got 4, 5, and 6 of them. It's kind of like, this is what we want to call it. So what are some of the other ones, John?
Well, it affects your work. So
work
employment, work difficulties, that sort of thing. Again, the financial difficulties that may come in with that.
Are you bringing it into
mentioned
work?
tolerance.
Like all of a
Tolerance,
sudden you're bringing vodka in a water bottle to
Right.
work,
So you're doing the
or
drinking.
to like the birthday party or whatever. Yeah.
Another symptom is preoccupation. You have to understand
So you
what
have to
that
do a lot of
means.
planning to get the drug
right?
or to use
you
it.
will protect or hide your supply.
You get in trouble with the law just to try to get that supply.
There are social impacts such as marriage, and another symptom is that somebody in your life has expressed concern about your relationship with alcohol and drugs.
Breakdown of what you normally would ethically do.
Okay.
In other words,
so we got it right. Like
Yeah.
that's off the cuff.
I mean,
the
people
symptom
would
sets
end
that
up
we look for.
somebody that would not enter into prostitution
Yeah, right.
because of addiction.
And what's funny about this, John, to me, with our experience going way back with this, I love the way that you started us out, and well, we have a couple more minutes that we can go, but maybe we give the audience a break and cut out like 3 minutes.
I
before,
wanna
because- Okay, good.
That we are not without hope.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. I'm going to let you take us out here in a minute or two.
Okay.
But isn't it like, wow, you know it when you see it? Like with a seasoned professional that's dealt with this, or if you've had a spouse with addiction,
Let's say family members.
you see it. You know what this is. And it's really clear to you. And you know what it's not. Like, just like pornography. You know what's not pornography when you're looking at it. When you've lived this, or you've been around addiction and you've been processing through this with people, man, it's clear, isn't it?
You're right.
It's clear.
Well, I the thing is, I've had clients that have had relatives, let's say parents, fathers or mothers, that struggle with addiction. The children tend to be very control oriented. They want to be able to have, and they have this very strong sense of having had grown up and taking adult responsibilities at a very young age. That's another aspect.
Yeah, we'll talk about this topic again because,
Right.
man, the reality of family dynamics is huge. Like I said, we didn't even get to that like we planned today, which is fine. One more real quick little segment. I think that we have time. How much time do you want to wrap up with?
I just need to give this advice.
Okay. Here's the manifestation of this in real life in a therapy office through my therapist's eyes. More times than not, I have worked with a client where they're very much in this, like, I don't know, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. We've broken down the denials, so we're having honest communication about what's going on in your life. And I may spend, 5-6 months with this person, evaluating this and trying to figure out, like, does this really affect me or does this not? It's like, I don't know. And I don't have a blood test that I can jerk blood out of your arm and put it under a microscope and say, yes, it is. That's part of the science of what we're doing with diagnostics. But I call this stage the experiment. So what I've done many times over when I go into with a client the experiment, I'll present it to him. It's like, look, go ahead and drink. We'll talk about what's going on with it. We'll track it. We'll follow it. And I did this with one person for like a year and a half, 2 years while they were in a therapy experience. They stopped therapy. They came back in another aspect of their life a year later, and we went into this experiment again, and finally he kind of came out. He's like, look, we went down to the beach. I started drinking before we had lunch just because I wanted to get a start on it. We had lunch, I had a beer there, we went down to the beach. Of course, you're going to drink with families all drinking at the beach. It was kind of cool. Came back. I wanted to have another drink before dinner or whatever. I drank with the dinner thing. Chris, they all stopped and went to bed. I kept on drinking that light. Like, this needs to stop.
Yeah.
That was 3 years into like this experimental, like, are you not?
It says pre-contemplation, then contemplation.
That's
then
motivational
action.
interviewing stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
So you were in a prolonged conversation
with this
the
guy to
client.
figure out, like, it's so difficult. Can I identify this for myself or not? So, listen, John, you're going to take us out. If you've listened to this show, you really need to know that we've talked about this throughout our discussions on addiction. And so we've taken deep dives on this before, and it's exciting to talk to other professionals about it because the energy of what you got with this show is what you get when you do that
Yeah.
with
I
professionals.
think I learned a lot.
Yeah, and so keep tuning in. I hope we haven't confused you even more. We may have, but that's what happens when you begin talking about these things.
Bottom line
you
is
go.
if you've got questions and you need to have some education, you can always contact us here at Metrolina through a therapist eyes, let's say both you can go to a website, and it's a government website. It's SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and it's samhsa.gov. And you can always get help 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It doesn't take any holidays. And if you've got this sense that you really would like to
Stop the chaos.
stop the chaos and the destruction, you go ahead and make this call. And let me
Reach
give you
out
the
and get
number.
help for
Reach
addiction.
out. Yeah. It is 1-800-662-HELP. 1-800-662-HELP, H-E-L-P.
I appreciate that, John, because, when you've worked with the addictions field for as long as clearly you and I have, you get a compassion for this. You get an understanding of the carnage that happens for people, and oftentimes for a lifetime. And the systems of denial, they just miss it, and they have a horrible misery, and through no fault of their own. So reach out if you've got questions. Like John said, don't be alone. Deal with the shame. Don't let the shame block you, and reach out and get help. John, I thank you for that. Victoria, thank you for your energy and discussion. I think we've done some good here.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right,
No,
you guys
good
have
episode. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
good week, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Thank you.